Ever get the feeling that beneath all the scientific breakthroughs and, theological doctrines, there's maybe a deeper current of understanding we've somehow lost touch with?
Yeah.
What if the ancients weren't just, well, primitive, but actually held a master key to the universe that we're only just beginning to glimpse again?
That's a really compelling thought, isn't it? This notion that wisdom isn't just a straight line forward, but maybe something cyclical.
Exactly. Like we might have forgotten some really profound insights from way back.
Mm-hmm.
And that's precisely what we're plunging into today. Welcome to this custom deep dive, crafted just for you based on some truly thought-provoking material you sent our way.
Yeah, our goal here is really to extract the most significant, maybe even surprising, nuggets of knowledge hidden within these texts.
And our source material for this exploration is, well, it's a fascinating one.
It really is. We're looking at excerpts from H.P. Blavatsky's Isis Unveiled, specifically the title page, preface, and the Before the Veil section.
Published, as we can sort of piece together from the preface, around September 1877. And Blavatsky is identified as the corresponding secretary of the Theosophical Society.
Right.
So what's our mission on this deep dive? What are we really trying to, get at here?
Well, I think we're aiming to get to the heart of Blavatsky's central arguments. To understand this ancient wisdom she's so focused on revealing,
Right.
and also to see how she positions it against the big intellectual currents of her time, science, and theology.
Right. And for you listening, if you're looking to gain knowledge efficiently, maybe get to the core of things quickly, this should offer some really interesting perspectives.
Yeah.
Some aha moments, hopefully.
Absolutely, because Blavatsky, she lays out her intentions pretty clearly right at the start, doesn't
Well,
she?
yeah, no uncertain terms.
Yeah.
She calls the book a master key to the mysteries of ancient and modern science and theology.
Pretty bold claim.
Yeah, wouldn't you agree?
It's certainly ambitious, and she goes further, right?
Yeah.
She says she wants to help students grasp the vital principles which underlie the philosophical systems of old.
And champion truth against prejudice, basically.
Exactly,
Yeah.
even when it clashes with, established beliefs.
Okay, so with that grand ambition laid out, let's really dig in. What would you say is the core of Blavatsky's argument in these initial sections?
Fundamentally, it's this strong assertion that ancient philosophical and religious systems, especially from the East, India, Chaldea, Egypt,
Okay.
and their later echoes in the West, like Platonism, that these hold a more profound, maybe even more accurate understanding of reality than modern science and theology did in her day.
Wow. So she's really flipping the script on progress there.
She really is. And what's striking, I think, is her early recognition of the limits of a purely materialistic worldview.
Yeah.
That's a debate that's still going on today, right?
Right.
About consciousness, the nature of reality.
Yeah.
Even if her answers are, let's say, unconventional, the questions she raises about scientific sort of dogmatism, they still feel relevant.
And she doesn't mince words when it comes to how she sees modern science and theology, does she?
Not at all. She basically accuses them of being, well, limited by their own biases, ignorant of this deeper ancient knowledge, and even, actively resistant to it. There's a real sense of her pitting ancient wisdom against what she sees as the closed-mindedness of her time.
There's some pretty forceful quotes that really highlight this, aren't there? Something about them refusing to give truth a fair hearing.
Precisely. She writes that while the clergy, following their own interpretations of the Bible and science its self-made codex of possibilities in nature, refuse it a fair hearing, real science and true religion are silent and gravely wait further developments.
That paints a picture, doesn't it? Established authorities just stubbornly ignoring something deeper.
Yeah. And she even brings in John Tyndall, a well-known scientist of the era,
Oh, right.
quoting his sad confession about the boundaries of scientific knowledge to kind of bolster her point.
What did he say again?
She quotes him saying, "If you ask me whether science has solved or is likely in our day to solve the problem of this universe, I must shake my head in doubt."
Oh. And she uses that to say, see, even they admit they don't have all the answers.
Exactly, to underscore what she sees as the inherent limitations of just looking at things scientifically and materially.
Okay. All of this seems to be building towards her introducing this idea of a universal religion, or maybe a secret doctrine.
That's a crucial cornerstone, yeah. She proposes that these, seemingly diverse ancient philosophies and religions, they aren't actually separate things, but more like different facets of a single underlying body of, let's call it, primordial knowledge.
Like different languages describing the same reality.
That's a good way to put it, yeah.
Okay, so if this ancient wisdom is so important, what's Blavatsky's view on like the fundamental nature of reality. And where do humans fit in?
Well, her view is that there's a spiritual reality that forms the bedrock, the foundation of the material world we see.
Right.
And importantly, the spiritual dimension isn't just about faith. It's something that can be accessed through inner knowing.
Not just through the senses or dogma.
Exactly, through developing our own spiritual capacities, rather than just relying on, sensory data or what religion tells you.
And she puts a lot of emphasis on the potential within human beings, doesn't she?
Absolutely. She talks about humanity having an immortal spirit. And this spirit is deeply connected to what she calls a universal soul, or God.
Okay.
But it's not just about having a soul. She suggests the spirit has this latent omnipotence.
Omnipotence. Why?
Yeah, the potential to actually influence the natural world and directly experience the spiritual realm.
That definitely goes against the grain of a lot of the scientific thinking back then.
It certainly does, very much so. And there are some really powerful statements that drive this point home. For instance, she says, for the first time we received the assurance that the Oriental philosophy has room for no other faith than an absolute and immovable faith in the omnipotence of man's own immortal self.
That's a remarkably, empowering statement. Almost radically so for that time.
It is. And then there's the connection she draws between proving the soul and proving God.
Right. Tell me about that.
She asserts, prove the soul of man by its wondrous powers, you have proved God.
So our own inner potential is the evidence.
Yeah, that's the idea. Our spiritual capacities are direct proof of a larger divine reality. It's quite a central idea for her.
Now, she mentions elevating ancient sages above modern scientists. At first, it sounds almost sarcastic.
Yeah, there's a bit of that initially. She makes this kind of polite nod, suggesting ancient philosophers were, well enough for their respective generations, but they were illiterate as compared with modern men of science.
Right, sounds like faint praise.
Exactly. It's clearly a rhetorical setup. Her real argument is that these ancient figures possessed a deeper, more essential understanding.
An understanding that modern science, maybe by focusing too much on the material, has actually missed.
Precisely. That it's obscured the deeper truths.
And she singles out Plato. Why is Plato so vital for her understanding of this ancient wisdom?
She sees Platonic philosophy as this critical link. She actually describes it as the most elaborate compend of the abstruse systems of old India.
So Plato is a bridge.
Kind of, yeah. A bridge connecting Western thought back to the much older spiritual insights of the East, especially Vedic philosophy.
Okay.
In her view, Plato is faithfully mirroring the spiritual ideas of these ancient Indian thinkers.
So for Blavatsky, what specific parts of Plato's philosophy really mattered? What made it so important?
Well, she really emphasizes Plato's focus on real knowledge, the understanding of eternal, unchanging truths that lie beyond the messy, shifting material world.
Right, the forms, that kind of thing.
Exactly, and she highlights Plato's concept of the nous.
Nous. What's that exactly?
Often translated as intellect or spirit, she describes it as being generated by the Divine Father, so it's inherently connected to the divine. And because of that connection, it has the capacity to directly perceive these ultimate eternal realities.
Okay, that makes sense within her framework. She also brings in Pythagoreanism, right? How does that fit in?
Yeah, she discusses Pythagoras' fundamental principle of an underlying unity.
Unity behind all the diversity we see.
Exactly, the permanent principle of unity beneath the forms, changes, and other phenomena. She links this directly to the ancient doctrine of emanation.
Emanation, like everything flowing out from one source.
Precisely, a single source radiating outwards to create the multiplicity of the universe. And she draws parallels there with Hindu cosmogony.
Interesting. And numbers are big for Pythagoras, aren't they?
Yes, she touches on that. The Pythagorean idea that numbers aren't just for counting, but are symbolic.
Symbolic of what?
Of the fundamental laws and harmonies that govern the cosmos. She even quotes the Apostle Paul, out of him and through him and in him all things are, and connects that to the ancient Hindu text, the Manava Dharmasastra, to show how universal this idea is.
And the decade, she mentions that too.
Right, the mystic decade, the number 10, seen as a symbol representing the entire cosmic order.
Okay. Blavatsky also talks about the ancient mysteries. What did she think their purpose was? Were they just like strange rituals?
Not at all, according to her. She argues quite strongly that the ancient mysteries were far from just being spectacles or, farces.
So what were they then?
She presents them as sacred institutions, guardians, really, transmitters of esoteric knowledge.
Ah, secret knowledge.
Exactly. Designed to illustrate these profound spiritual and philosophical doctrines, she values, the soul's pre-existence, its journey, its purification.
And she sees a direct link between these mystery schools and the philosophies she's talking about, like Plato's.
Absolutely. She quotes Porphyry, another ancient philosopher, who apparently asserted that Platonic philosophy was actually taught and demonstrated within the mysteries.
Wow.
And she also brings in Theon of Smyrna, who compared philosophical training to the stages of mystic initiation.
Stages, like steps on a path.
Yeah, a 5-step path he outlined, culminating in direct communion with the divine, the ultimate goal.
This is creating such a fascinating picture of this, like, lost world of wisdom she's trying to recover. She also introduces a whole bunch of terms, what we might call occult concepts. Can we maybe unpack a few of the more intriguing ones?
Yeah.
Understand how she defines them.
Definitely. Yeah, understanding these terms is pretty crucial for getting a handle on her ideas. Let's take akasa.
Akasa.
Blavatsky's concept of akasa, it draws from ancient Indian ideas, and it was pretty influential later on in esoteric circles. You should think of it less as just literal invisible sky.
Okay.
And more as a kind of primordial substance, like a fundamental field from which everything else comes.
The source material for reality?
Sort of, yeah. It's a theme you see in lots of mystical traditions, this idea of a fundamental unity underneath everything. She calls it the invisible sky, the source of life, universal ether. She even links it to the anima mundi, the world's soul.
Okay. And what about the astral light? That term always seems to pop up in these kinds of discussions.
Right. She describes astral light as like an intermediate realm, a kind of sidereal light.
Sidereal, like...
Stars, yeah,
Roman.
star-related, but more like an energetic field. She sees it as the workshop of nature, where things happen on both spiritual and physical levels.
Or workshop.
Yeah, and she connects it to all sorts of phenomena, mesmerism, even things like levitation.
Levitation.
Yep.
That definitely grabs your attention.
It does. She also talks about elementals, or elementary spirits.
Elementals, like fairies and gnomes.
Well, maybe related to those folk ideas, but she defines them more as beings linked to the 4 classical elements: earth, air, fire, water. They function as forces of nature, she says, or maybe even as agents for disembodied spirits.
Okay. What else?
Then you have the Hermetist. That's a follower of Hermes Trismegistus, who was seen as this legendary master of arcane sciences.
Right. And the Hierophant.
Hierophant and the Initiate, these are the people who possess and pass on the secret, deep knowledge taught in those ancient mysteries we mentioned.
Got it. Keepers of the secrets.
Exactly.
There are also quite a few terms that sound like they come directly from Eastern traditions, right?
Yeah, oh yes. Lots. Like mantra and vach.
Like mantras, like chanting.
Sort of. Sacred words or formulas believed to hold actual power. Vach is like the personification of mystic speech itself.
Okay. And metempsychosis. Sounds complex.
That's her term for the soul's journey. It's progress through different stages of existence, not just simple reincarnation, but a more complex evolution. And Petrus. Petrus are described as lunar ancestors, spirits of earlier, more spiritually advanced human races that supposedly existed before our.
Lunar ancestors. Intriguing.
She also mentions Soma.
The sacred drink.
Right, the sacred Hindu drink, or sometimes a symbolic substitute. It was believed to create a bridge between the spirit and soul, leading to inspiration, divine insight.
Okay. And yajna.
Yajna is a Hindu sacrificial ritual, but she sees it as more than just sacrifice. It's a mystery rite, a way to connect with the world of gods and spirits. And she links it back to akasa and the power of human will.
Wow. It's a really rich and complex vocabulary she's drawing on.
It definitely is.
She also makes a very specific point about the difference between spirit and soul. We tend to use those words almost interchangeably today.
Yes. And for her, this is a really crucial distinction. It's rooted in ancient philosophy, particularly Plato.
So how does she define them differently?
She defines spirit as the nous, that immortal divine spark within us we talked about earlier, connected to the divine Father.
Right.
Whereas the soul, the psyche in Greek, or nephesh in Hebrew, is more the vital life force, the animating principle that we share with animals and all living things. It's mortal, unlike the spirit.
Ah, okay. Spirit is divine and immortal. Soul is vital but mortal. That's a key difference.
A very key difference in her system, yes.
And just going back to levitation for a second, she actually tries to explain how it might work.
She does, yeah. She proposes this electrochemical explanation.
Electrochemical. Sounds almost scientific.
Well, she suggests it involves a change in the electrical polarity within the person's body.
Polarity. Like magnets.
Kind of. The idea is that by changing their polarity, they could actually repel the Earth's natural magnetism, allowing them to float.
Hmm. Was there any actual scientific basis for that back then, or is it more like a speculative analogy she's using?
It's definitely more on the speculative side, but it's interesting, isn't it? It shows how she was trying to bridge these ancient, seemingly magical concepts with the scientific language of her time.
Trying to make it sound plausible, maybe?
Perhaps, or just find analogies. But yeah, however unconventional those attempts look to us now.
Finally, what about spiritualism? That was a huge movement in her time. What was your take on it?
She actually saw spiritualism as potentially valuable, as a possible middle ground,
Between what?
between the hard materialism of science on one side and the rigid dogma of traditional religion on the other.
Ah, so a way to explore the reality of spirit.
Exactly. Even though she definitely acknowledged its flaws, its potential for fraud, for misinterpretation, she still saw it as important evidence that there was something beyond the purely material. It offered phenomena to study, even if her own understanding of what was causing those phenomena was quite distinct from mainstream spiritualist views.
Right. She had her own complex system to explain it all.
Mm-hmm.
So as we begin to sort of wrap up this initial deep dive into the opening of Isis Unveiled, what are the really key insights that stand out for you?
Well, I think we definitely see Blavatsky laying the groundwork for her huge central thesis, that ancient wisdom just offers a more complete, more accurate picture of the universe than modern approaches.
Right. The superiority of the ancients.
Yeah. And the emphasis on the primacy of spiritual reality and also the vast, often untapped potential within human beings themselves.
That omnipotence idea.
Exactly. Plus, she introduces this whole lexicon of occult terms: akasa, astral light, nous, psyche. These are the building blocks for her entire worldview. And she stresses these crucial distinctions, like between spirit and soul.
And for you, listening in, we really hope this has provided maybe a different angle on the pursuit of knowledge, perhaps sparking some of those aha moments, and maybe a deeper curiosity about these, let's face it, pretty esoteric ideas. You know, how do these concepts like akasa and astral light actually connect to her idea of a spiritual reality underlying the material one? Are they like different layers?
That's a great question. Blavatsky seems to suggest a kind of layered reality, yeah. With akasa maybe as the most fundamental primordial substance, and the astral light as a more dynamic intermediary realm, a space where forces and influences, both good and bad, play out. It's all part of a very complex, interconnected web, in her view.
Right. Not simple.
Definitely not simple. And look, this has really just scratched the surface. You've likely got many more questions swirling around these fascinating topics now.
Oh, I'm sure.
So consider this an invitation, really. An invitation to explore further. These concepts she introduces, they could be really interesting springboards for your own research, your own thinking.
Absolutely. So maybe here's a final thought for you to ponder. If the ancients truly did possess something like this master key to understanding the universe, what other profound insights might we have accidentally, discarded or just overlooked in our relentless modern march towards the new?
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it?
Could re-examining some of these seemingly forgotten perspectives actually offer us fresh ways of thinking about the challenges and maybe the possibilities of our own world today?